Hello and welcome back to Between the Hashes, our weekly college football primer. Coming to you from Los Angeles, California, I'm your host, Matt Keim, and this week we're going to change it up a little bit. We've hit the end of the regular season, so I've decided to, instead of taking 7 or 8 minutes to talk about one game, I'm going to use that same time to just talk about the most consequential conference championship games this season. The 5 Power 5s plus the American Athletic Conference Championship game between UCF and Tulane. The reason for this is that the playoff field should already be pretty much set. Michigan and Georgia are in no matter what happens this weekend, and I think the same can be said of TCU. So 3 of the 4 slots are already decided. There is a little bit of ambiguity with what's going to happen with the game tonight between USC and Utah. And should USC lose, does that open the door for like an Ohio State or somebody like that? Quick aside, in the event that USC does lose, I don't think Alabama should be anywhere remotely close to the conversation. They have not been good enough. They have not beaten enough good teams. And to be honest, it's a little bit goofy that Tennessee is right behind them with a win not only over Alabama itself, but also a win over the other team Alabama lost to. So if we're doing the thing we're going to debate for a 2-loss team, I think Tennessee actually has more of an argument. Regardless of whether or not Hendon Hooker is even playing, because as Ohio State fans can tell you, we have seen a team get into the playoff after losing its star quarterback. Soapboxing aside, who's going to win this weekend? A little bit of a spoiler. I'm not expecting too much drama from any of the games this weekend. Low stakes as many of them may be, or as low stakes as conference championship games can get. So we'll start at the top of the rankings with the ACC Championship game between the first overall ranked Georgia Bulldogs and the 14th ranked LSU Tigers. This was a much more interesting game 2 weeks ago. Star quarterback Jaden Daniels, his health is way up in the air for LSU. They're limping into this game off of a really bad loss to Texas A&M. And while I don't think that should diminish the season that they've been having, I also think that this is the end of the road for LSU. Georgia wins. I'd be surprised if this was a close game. Purdue versus Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. Okay, let's be honest. The real Big Ten championship game happened last week. Like Georgia, Michigan's in the playoff no matter what happens this weekend. Like the SEC title game, this game kind of feels just like a formality. The Big Ten West has been a complete mess all year. For a while, it looked like Illinois was starting to gain some momentum, then they fell apart, and then like Iowa lost to Nebraska late, and Minnesota choked late, and Wisconsin's been bad all year. The division's a mess, and so Purdue was kind of just the only one left standing. Purdue has had a decent season, but they kind of need to play a perfect game to keep this thing even remotely close against Michigan, who has suffered some bad injury news with the news that Blake Corum is definitively out for the rest of the season. It didn't matter against Ohio State, shockingly enough. It probably won't matter here. Michigan should win this one. They should win this comfortably, and they should pick up some extra steam going into the playoff. Real quick, there's a little fun fact about Purdue in that head coach Jeff Brom is 3-0 against top-ranked teams as an underdog as Purdue's coach, with one of the notable wins being a blowout win against Ohio State back in 2018. I just don't see it here. I don't see it with this one. This is kind of where the weakness of the division format comes from, in that the two real best teams in this conference played each other last weekend, and then the third best team is also in that division in Penn State. So, yeah, Michigan wins. This is the first game that it could have actually some potential to be interesting. The last time these two teams played, Kansas State raced out to a 20-10 lead, and then star quarterback Adrian Martinez and his backup both got hurt in that game. So they had 3 different quarterbacks taking snaps in that game. They blew the lead. TCU won late. And that game was kind of used as the narrative that TCU kept falling behind, that the committee kept them the lowest ranked of the unbeatens for the longest time. I firmly believe that TCU's resume is good enough to where they don't need to win this game to get into the playoffs, with the exception, like barring like a 40-point loss or something like that. So the stakes for this game are kind of what the other two are, but I think this has the potential to be a very competitive game, especially because Kansas State is optimistic that quarterback Adrian Martinez should be ready to go. But that remains to be seen. It's really hard to beat the same team in a season twice, but I think TCU knows that they just have too much to lose, and I think they want to do everything they can to secure their spot. And while normally I'd be a little bit more metrics and analytics heavy with picking the winner of a game, I just don't see TCU blowing this one. So TCU wins. Okay, on to the next game, and this one actually does have real playoff implications, unlike the other three, with USC and Utah rematching. This is the second of 3 rematches I'm going to talk about in this video, and this one is by far the most intriguing to me because the first time they played, Utah eked out a win at home over USC. That win involved a late 2-point conversion and some late-game heroics, just falling just short from Caleb Williams. This game's on a neutral site in Vegas now, and so it's a very different atmosphere than Salt Lake City is going to be. My guess is it's going to be a lot more Trojan sympathetic crowd. While I have very real questions about USC's defense, the way that Caleb Williams and the company have been playing on offense for the last month and a half of this season has been so spectacular. The guy's going to win the Heisman regardless of what happens this week. I think USC wins because they know that they are the only one in the top 4 currently that probably could get knocked out. Because if they lose, here's the scenario. You have a USC team that has lost to a good but not great Utah team that lost to a very bad Florida team, and they lost to Utah twice in the same season. Have them against a 10-2 Alabama team that, again, I don't think Alabama should be up there, but other people disagree with me, that has other ranked wins and has played markedly better on defense. You have them against a Tennessee team that has some of the best wins in the country, with their only 2 losses both coming to ranked teams, one to Georgia in Athens. And then you have them against probably the team that would get the nod, Ohio State, whose only loss is to the other presumptive favorite in the national title race with Michigan. Point being is that USC is in the most precarious position in the top 4, and I think they are more than aware of that. And I think, like I said, it's really, really hard to beat the same team in the season twice, and Utah doesn't have the advantage of being at home this time. I think USC wins. Okay, game 5, the ACC Championship game with 9th-ranked Clemson and 23rd-ranked North Carolina. And my goodness, this game was so much more interesting a month ago. So both of these teams won their respective division weeks ago, but both of these teams have had some very bad late-season stumbles. In North Carolina's case, they lost in successive weeks to Georgia Tech and NC State, respectively. And in Clemson's case, they got demolished by Notre Dame in South Bend. And then last week, they were upset by a surging South Carolina team. Had those results not happened, or maybe just like the Notre Dame game for Clemson, you'd have, in theory, 2 11-1 teams fighting for what could be that 4th playoff spot. But that's not what happened. I actually think this has a potential to be a really great game, and it's going to be a really great showcase for Drake May. But it's hard to have any faith in this North Carolina team just with the way they've been limping in. But it's also like, it's not like Clemson's been super hot either. I just kind of trust Clemson a little bit more in this situation. So I think Clemson wins this game. I actually think this game has the potential to be like more competitive than some of the games at the top end. It just happens to be the lowest stakes of the 6 games I'm talking about. So Clemson wins. But North Carolina and Drake May should have a good showing, but I think Clemson's defense should be enough to overcome it. And our final game, and while this is not the only other conference championship game, this is the only other one involving ranked teams being played, so I think it's worth talking about. Central Florida going to New Orleans to take on Tulane in a rematch of a game that only happened a few weeks ago. When that game got played, UCF ran out to a 2-score lead, and kind of just maintained that lead for the duration of the game. Tulane made it close late, but it was UCF was kind of in control the whole time. That said, Tulane is favored this time around, and I think I agree with that because it's really, really, really hard to beat the same team twice in the same season, and because of the way the American Conference holds its conference championship game, where the game is located in the stadium of the highest seed team in the game. So the game is once again in New Orleans. Not only is it hard to beat the same team in the same season twice, going on the road in that stadium twice and doing it, not impossible, and it might be a bit of a meme to just pick Tulane for that reason alone. But here's another reason. John Reese Plumlee, the star quarterback for Central Florida, has been dealing with injury issues for about the last month of the season or so, and it's not like UCF is coming streaking into this game. They had a terrible loss to a bad Navy team, and it's why they're kind of in the position that they are. The real thing is that I think this game actually has some of the highest stakes out of any of the games this weekend because, like I said, I firmly believe that 3 of the 4 playoff spots are already locked up, with USC taking that likely 4th spot. And so this one has the stakes of whomever wins this game gets to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. UCF has been in this position multiple times, and Tulane is fighting to get a place on that stage. While there is a very noticeable gap in terms of talent and quality of play between them and like the Power 5 conferences, this conference has been kind of the de facto G5 representative in the New Year's Six Bowls, with their teams taking 6 out of the 8 potential spots up to this point in time. So Memphis, Houston, Cincinnati, and Central Florida have all had a chance to play in those games, with Cincinnati making 2 appearances. The other 2, by the way, are Western Michigan and Boise State. So whomever wins this game gets to play in something like the Cotton Bowl, or a level of a bowl that is way higher than the exposure typically afforded to a team like Tulane. I think this game's going to be a fun game. You got 2 great rushing attacks, and you have some fun coaching with Gus Malzahn in Central Florida. But the health of John Reese Plumlee gives me pause, and because the game's in New Orleans, I know I picked Tulane last time. I was wrong last time. I'm staying with the Green Wave. Let's go Tulane. You're going to do it this time. And so my final predictions are Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC, Clemson, and Tulane all taking it. All the Vegas favorites, the graphics, you should see the lines on the graphics. I'm not going to pick the spreads this time. I'm just going to take the winners. Those are my 6. And my 4 playoff spots. I think Georgia and USC will play each other, and then Michigan and TCU will play each other in the Fiesta Bowl. So those are my predictions, and thank you for sticking with me to the end. Remember to give us a like, comment, subscribe. Remember, look us up on Empire Media. That's AMPIRE, Empire with an A. Remember, the Washington Commanders are on a heater right now, so keep in touch with that by following the John Keim Report. Follow Alex Ovechkin's chase to get to the Great Ones record with All's Caps, hosted by former Capitals defenseman Carl Alsner and AP hockey writer Steve Wino. Find all of that and more on Empire Media on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the games.